Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided. This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy is sponsored by Thomson Reuters, providing legal professionals with the intelligence, technology, and human expertise they need to find trusted answers. Products include Westlaw, Practical Law, and Firm Central legal practice management software for small law firms. Thomson Reuters, the answer company. Online at thomsonreuters.com. Access to Democracy is made possible in part by a donation from Firefly Credit Union. Firefly is the new name of U.S. Federal Credit Union, which has proudly served the financial needs of the Greater Twin Cities community since 1925. At Firefly, we guide our members forward and give them the power to chase dreams by delivering the financial solutions they need to get ahead. From checking accounts to mortgages, we'll light the way. We are Firefly Credit Union, and this is Life Illuminated. And Dr. Charles Crutchfield of award-winning Crutchfield Dermatology in Eagan, acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. A Minnesota native who trained at the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Crutchfield personally treats all patients and states that experience counts and quality matters. Crutchfield Dermatology. Look good, feel great, with beautiful skin.
Welcome back to Access to Democracy. Alan Miller with you as usual, although we have had some very good guest hosts on the show recently and conducting some very interesting interviews. We have two guests here, Gary Wederspahn, who has been with us previously and is a member, he's a Dakota County resident and a member of the board of the Final Exit Network, and Faith Riverstone, who is here to tell her story. A courageous woman who is in her 40s, a mother of 4, and takes care of an ailing mother herself. And Faith found out in 2015, really from a medical diagnosis, a horrible diagnosis. Why don't you tell us what you found out?
Well, after being sick for 6 years and suffering without a diagnosis, I finally got 2 diagnoses, one for my physical issue, which is myasthenia gravis, which is a muscle weakening autoimmune, and the other is major neurocognitive disorder, which is the fancy new DSM-5's term for dementia. And dementia is a horrible, progressive, fatal disease process.
For which there is no cure, as of the moment anyway.
And the medicine that we have for it is similar to an oxygen tank for someone with failing lungs. It doesn't really fix the brain, it just gives you a little more to work with. So there really isn't a treatment for it. And the outcome is pretty poor.
And you decided that you want to make your own decisions with your life, if I understand that correctly.
Absolutely. You know, I've made my own decisions in everything, you know, my career, where I live, what I do with my life, having children, what their names are. Why wouldn't I choose how to die?
And have you noticed anything that's diminished in terms of your cognitive capacity, and what is that?
Yes, I have significant problems with my cognition. I'm still me. I still have my emotions. I still have my thinking and my core self, but I process things very slowly. I have difficulty doing everything. I also suffer from aphasia, which It's the brain affecting my ability to speak, so sometimes drop some words. I have watched, as a speaker and a writer, I have watched my communication skills go for the last 7 years. And now I feel very limited, my ability, that I struggle with all my tasks. I've limited my life over the last 7 years to the most bare essentials, and even then I struggle with all of that. I need help to get dressed.
How about the memory?
I have some pretty good memory, especially of older events, emotional things, but I can set something down, forget that I did it. I can, get my mom dinner and come up 2 minutes later to get her dinner again. So it's, the short-term memory.
When we talked before we went on air, you told me that in going to some Alzheimer's groups and places like that, you were given the name Final Exit Network, and you did some research and looked them up and found out that they're basically an organization, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I'm going to let Gary tell us really how they see it, an organization that wants to be able to help somebody have death with dignity and to have an assisted suicide in those cases where competent people decide that it's the end of the road and they don't want to go any further. But they can't do that in Dakota County because from a case in 2007, it was prosecuted against Final Exit Network here in Dakota County. And as we sit here, an appeal is pending from actually a second trial. The first trial, the judge struck down two provisions of Statute 609, 215 of the Minnesota statutes, but he left one in, and it was conceived by the prosecution in Dakota County that even discussing the right to die might be assisting a suicide. They were prosecuted before a jury, and beyond my comprehension, the jury found them guilty, and they were fined the maximum fine of $33,000, which is the case that's up on appeal. It comes down to where does the right of the First Amendment, where does the right of freedom of speech end, and where does prosecution begin if somebody, in good faith, somebody who is competent, seeks to get information about how they can ease their death. Is that a fair statement, Gary?
Very, very much on target. The actual conviction, the words that were used were that Final Exit Network was convicted of speech that enabled Doreen Dunn in 2007 to use information that we provided in the form of a recommendation of a book that had practical details that she then used of her own volition.
Well, as a matter of fact, we have a cover of that book, and perhaps we can bring it up now. The book has nothing to do with your organization. It was written by somebody who doesn't have anything to do with your organization. But the book is called Final Exit. There we see a copy of it. And it's available in the library right here in Dakota County. Within the last 2 days, you checked once again.
Yes.
The book is available. But you were prosecuted, and I say you, I mean the Final Exit Network was prosecuted for utilizing the same information based on a query that a person had seeking death with dignity.
Yes, the woman who asked for it is a member of our organization. She freely asked for information. We provided it by recommending this book. This book is written by Derek Humphrey, sort of the father of the Right to Die movement in the United States, founder of Hemlock Society, for example. Final Exit Network is the modern version of Hemlock Society. So the name Final Exit is the name of the book. We have no commercial, no relationship whatsoever with the publisher or the author. The author, however, is one of our advisors of our organization. He is the grand old man of the entire movement in the United States.
So Faith contacted Final Exit Network, and she said, I am suffering from dementia, etc., etc., etc. And she has a litany of things, not only that she's suffering from, but that have been troublesome to her for 7 years. In effect, what she said to me was, I saw the handwriting on the wall, and I want to be ready when I want to exit this life to do it painlessly for myself and my family, and as intelligently as possible. So, very few people, I might say, have the courage to come forward and give their name and identify themselves as being in your situation, and I really commend you because it's a very courageous thing to do. But as you said to me outside, what you want to do is make it easier, not only for yourself, but for others who find themselves in this situation or a similar situation, to exit peacefully, practically, because we know the medical costs of somebody who is kept alive. There was just an article yesterday in the Star Tribune about compassionate death, and it talked of how somebody suffered the medical costs of keeping somebody alive, which is to me bizarre and absurd, but there are people who say I'm bizarre and absurd also, so it just makes no sense. So you contacted them and they told you they couldn't discuss it.
Yes. And they explained about the lawsuit in Minnesota. And I said, well, you know, I would really like this information. Where do I need to go to get this? And so we flew down to North Carolina, and I was instructed on, you know, what I need to know. But beyond just instructed, so now I know how to end my life more peacefully. But really, their guides really ask you a lot of questions to get you really thinking about all the different aspects of this. So you're really not just making a choice of this is hard, so I want out of something hard. They're really getting you to think out and really giving you every opportunity to change your mind, and to make sure this is what you really want. I'm real clear what I want, so it's not them telling me that. It's me choosing that for myself.
And some of the other things they discussed, other than a way to go peacefully, a way to go painlessly, are the other considerations. What about my family?
Yes.
What about others? You are a caregiver to your mother.
Yes.
All of these things. And I might say, as I understand it from both you and Gary, that before they even took on to discuss it with you, which they wouldn't discuss in Minnesota based on this case,
Yes.
beyond my belief, is they wanted your entire medical record. They wanted to confirm everything about you. They put you through a series of interviews. And it's not just picking up the phone and saying, you know, I've decided it's time for me to die.
Right.
We have a whole series, a whole protocol of safeguards to be sure that the person is of sound mind. In your case, you are of sound mind, but you see the handwriting on the wall. The person's medical records is examined by a medical committee, physicians and other health workers. The counselor makes sure the person is looking at this decision from every possible angle and considering every possible alternative. The Final Exit Network does not recommend or encourage suicide, almost to the contrary, but we do respect people's final choices.
You respect two things: the right of a competent individual to make a decision for himself or herself, and you also, in that you are respecting the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Minnesota in terms of freedom of speech. But in the case that's on appeal, all you did was make information available, and you were convicted by a jury here in this county, where I live also. And I must say, to my great shame, that something like that could happen in this county. And the case is now on its second way up to, I guess, the Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court, is it?
We understand that the Dakota County prosecutor will appeal it if we win the appeal. So it'll go to the Supreme Court that route. And we have stated very clearly that if we lose at that level, we also will appeal to the Supreme Court.
So it's in the Court of Appeals now?
Yes.
Which is our intermediate appellate court.
Right. And apparently, the way is clear to go to the Supreme Court of the state.
And very interesting. Things change. For instance, the composition of our Supreme Court has changed and is changing. And there was just an article in today's paper about another judge who is being forced to retire at age 70, and the governor has made some wonderful appointments. We lost by age 70 requirements two marvelous judges. Paul Anderson, who's been on this show many, many times, is one of them, and a former Viking, Alan Page, who went on to a great legal career and a great judicial career, and he's replaced those two people with two women of great backgrounds. So it'll really be fascinating, because there'll be yet a third appointment having been made, and there's actually David Lillehag, a fine attorney, is also an appointment of Governor Dayton. So it'll be interesting when it finally gets to the Supreme Court as to who will hear it and what approach they will take to it.
None of this is academic for Faith. Her destiny depends on the decision of that court.
Yes.
Or you'll have to go out of state if you want to implement something, right?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty clear on, one way or another, and I don't refer to it as suicide. I refer to it as stopping unnaturally prolonging my life. Whether I have to stop a medication that is keeping me alive and have a long, slow death, whether I use a method that allow me a quick and painless death, very surefire, one way or another, it will happen. I'm 8 years away from memory care unit. The alternative for me when we cannot provide care for me in the home, which will come fairly soon here, because I was diagnosed so late in the disease process, that, I would go to a Medicaid nursing home, which is not designed for dementia care. Not only they're understaffed for regular elderly people that need their care, they would be woefully understaffed for people like me. What happens to people like us is, as our brain die, we lose our ability to understand things like we're hot or cold or hungry or need to go to the bathroom. We lose our ability to communicate. But what stays is our hardwiring, our need to get away. So you often see in dementia patients their desire to go home. I want to go home, I need to leave here, I need to go. They try to get away. Nobody knows how to handle these people. What they do in care settings, especially if they're understaffed, is they give us anti-psych medication. Anti-psych medication is, the FDA has banned all anti-psychs in use in dementia. The mechanics of it is to treat a chemical imbalance in the brain, but dementia is not a chemical imbalance in the brain, it's only brain death. And so
it's deterioration of the brain
right,
itself.
The only mechanical action of an anti-psych for a person with dementia would be to sedate us. I've often written that my greatest fear will be that I am cold and I'm agitated and trying to leave, and I will be sedated and not able to tell anyone, and no one will ever put a blanket on me.
In some cases, dementia patients who have the ability to get up and walk or try to leave and
Yes.
have to be strapped down.
I do believe that's illegal now.
I
So-
think it
so
is
they
also, but I
medically
think
sedate
it,
us.
I think it still happens. There are a lot of things that are illegal that still take place, and I'm not saying they take place here in Minnesota, but
So one solution they have in states that have that it's illegal to strap us down is all night long we will be kept in a wheelchair with the tray stuck on so that we can't get up. That
in
means-
effect being strapped down in
that
a
mea-
different way.
That means we'll never get to lay down, never have a blanket on us. Another way is to chemically sedate us, with the antipsychs, which speed our death, and which is why they're black box warned. And so, to me, all of this is untenable. I've lived such a good life, and I don't deserve that. I think we have wonderful technology to keep people alive, but when it comes to end of life, when it comes to somebody with a terminal diagnosis, when it comes to somebody suffering, those technologies keep us alive. All they do prolong our suffering.
We're
And-
very fortunate that you are as articulate as you are at this moment. And obviously you've seen a diminution of your values, your capacity in this regard. But you are extremely persuasive and articulate and intelligent, and being able to express it, as I said, it's a courageous thing to do. But I hope in terms of other people, that it will give them the courage if they face that choice. Gary, you're about to say something.
Well, what Faith just said just reminds me of our slogan, what we exist for. A good life. You talked about your good life. A good death, which you've described as not what I would call a good death. And your choice. And that's what she's trying, I think, to get.
I
is
think
to
we have
defend her choice.
actually your website and your logo in
I
that
believe-
regard, and perhaps we can bring that up. And Mary can do anything in the control room. She's unbelievable. We owe her our lives as well as this program.
There you go.
My life, my death, my choice, with the website.
FinalExitNetwork.org. That's how you found us, right?
Yes. Yeah, I one night in the middle of the night, I've heard the name Final Exit Network so many times, and I just really didn't have the brain capacity to figure out how to find you or how to contact you or what I would say. And one night in the middle of the night, I can't sleep, I'm watching the How to Die in Oregon movie, and they mention the Hemlock Society and Final Exit, and I think, I'm watching this lady with cancer, surrounded by the people she loved, having this wonderful death, and I'm just, again, thinking, why don't we have that here? We really should have that here. If we have a compassionate doctor who cares about us, who loves us, who wants to help us out, why can't we have that here? And, but they mentioned this, and I think, by golly, I'm going to, come hell or high water, figure out how to find you. So I get on my computer, and I try, and I finally find you, and I put in the contact information, and because I don't really understand time really well, I think it's been a number of days since I put that in there, and you haven't contacted me yet, so the next morning I call you, and I'm greeted by a very wonderful woman who tell me exactly how to become a member in such detail, as though she understands how my brain doesn't work. And I keep saying, I wish my workers you could tell them how to help me, because you guys seem to know how to say things in a way I
So
can
you
understand.
put this in the middle of the night, but
Yes.
by the next morning you thought the days had passed and
Yes.
they hadn't gotten back to you,
Yes.
indicative
Clearly eager.
of the suffering that you have gone through. But there are states who have various die with dignity or compassion statutes, several of them, and there are, I think, as many as 17 others that are considering it in some form or another. We had a similar statute, doctor-assisted suicide, here in Minnesota, which once again was blocked in the legislature this last term.
a very important component to those right to die laws and compassionate choices. And as much as I love them and adore them, they really neglect people with dementia and Alzheimer's, because they put forward the bill that you have to be within 6 months of your death and you have to be competent at the time you do it. If I followed this disease along until I'm 6 months within death, one, you're not going to know how fast it's going to
You
progress
might not
to
be
death.
competent.
I clearly would not be competent. And so I wish they would change their law or change what they put forward to extend it to us, to put in, except in cases of dementia and Alzheimer's, to allow us to go, well, we're still competent. Which bring into another point that many people argue of our going too early. You know, I don't know if the general public say that, but I know in the dementia community it's brought up quite often, where we're all talking about this. And the reality is you have to go, well, you still are competent. You have to go, well, you still have legal capacity to make the decision to go, which means you have to go fairly early on in the disease process.
Which is what you're saying, in effect, is when I feel that it's the right time, I will follow the protocols and I will make that decision. And, you know, I hope that I am competent enough to do it at that time. And one of the things you want to make sure is that it is your decision and your time.
Alan, she posed a problem to us. Final Exit Network and Hemlock Society before always absolutely strictly kept the confidentiality, not revealing the identity of a person who is a member and requests this type of information. We feel it's extremely private, extremely personal. Here we had someone who insisted, no, I want to tell my story. So this is the very first time that that has occurred.
And, well, we're practically out of time already, but we certainly hit the cogent articles or arguments that have to be made in this regard. And the only thing I can say is that we will follow this case, we will follow the appeal, and I certainly wish you the best of everything. And there's always, I guess, a chance that a drug surfaces tomorrow that can reverse some of these things, but we haven't seen that happen in decades, so we can't anticipate it. We're talking with Faith Riverstone and Gary Wederspahn of the Final Exit Network. It's really been a pleasure to have this discussion with you. Maybe pleasure is not the right word, but it certainly has been informative, and I can only wish you the best. Thank you both, and we'll keep on top of this.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for having us.